These were often incorporated into Roman religion, so that eventually they ended up with a complex set of beliefs and rituals. The Romans viewed themselves as both a religious people and one that was favored by the gods, and they would have pointed to divine providence as one of the explanations for their rise and success. Because of this, it's worth looking at Roman religious beliefs and practices and seeing how they influenced the actions of the Romans. The religion of the Romans was different in a number of profound ways, not just from modern monotheistic religions such as Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, but from the very ways in which we today tend to think about the purpose, functioning, and characteristics of religion. The most obvious difference is, of course, that Roman paganism was a polytheistic religion, meaning that there were many gods. For the Romans, the world was a place inhabited by an infinite number of gods, including many that they had not heard of. When the Romans encountered other religions, they were very open about adding these new gods to the list of those they already worshipped. Thus, the Roman pantheon was constantly expanding due to the addition of new gods. This attitude is vividly illustrated by a ritual called the evocatio. This occurred when the Romans were about to attack and possibly destroy an enemy city. Before launching the assault, the Roman priests would formally invite the gods of the city to abandon it and to take up residence at and be worshipped at Rome. The pantheon of Roman gods included deities who resembled humans, such as Jupiter, the king of the gods, personifications of abstract qualities, such as Victoria, the personification of victory, nature spirits or deities usually associated with geographic places or bodies of water, such as Father Tiber, and a variety of gods imported from foreign cultures, such as the Egyptian goddess Isis. Each individual would pick one or more gods to worship as his or her particular guardians. Since certain gods were associated with specific cities and professions, these gods would probably have received particular attention from people of that profession or who lived in that city. Roman religion did not possess a standardized sacred text like the Bible. While there were certain rituals, such as sacrifice, that were commonly prescribed for the worship of the gods, there was no central and all-encompassing theology. Roman religion was a loose collection of diverse gods and practices, allowing a great deal of variety and personal choice. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of divinities were worshipped in Roman polytheism. Further adding to the complexity of Roman religion was the fact that there were different types of gods whose power, inclinations, and areas of influence varied greatly. The state religion was based on the worship of a subset of all these gods who were thought to be particularly concerned with the success and preservation of the Roman state. But individuals could choose any combination of gods to pay homage to. The most prominent Roman gods were what might be termed the Olympian gods. This set of deities, derived from the Greek gods said to live on Mount Olympus, included Jupiter, Juno, Mars, Venus, Neptune, Apollo, Diana, Ceres, Bacchus, Mercury, Minerva, Vesta, and Vulcan. Some of the most important of these for the Romans were Jupiter, the king of the gods, and Mars, the god of war, both of whom were thought to be especially interested in the success of Rome. Often, however, these major gods were multiplied through the addition of epithets, which identified some particular aspect of the god. These epithets were usually related to either a location or an activity. For example, there were Jupiter Capitolinus, the Jupiter who lived on the Capitoline Hill, and Mars Ultor, Mars the Avenger, to whom the Emperor Augustus dedicated a temple in commemoration of his avenging the assassination of his adoptive father, Julius Caesar. Jupiter alone had at least 19 different epithets. In addition to these gods, there were what might be called demigods, which were often men who had attained divine status, such as the Greek hero Hercules and Romulus, the founder of Rome. There were many entities which might be called gods as well, such as spirits of streams, rivers, and trees. Such a god was a genius loci, literally the spirit of the place. Some gods were personifications of abstract qualities. The most important of these to the Romans were Fortuna, or luck, and Victoria, victory. Finally, there were all the gods borrowed from other cultures, including Egyptian, Etruscan, and Germanic ones. Further complicating Roman religion was the fact that when encountering new foreign gods, the Romans sometimes decided that these gods were simply local variants of gods they already knew. Thus, it's almost deceptive to speak of a single notion of godhood in Roman culture, since there were such a variety of forms that divine beings or spirits could take. Nor did they fit into any clear hierarchy. Any attempt to create such a hierarchy would quickly run into contradictions and problems in logic. Even to try to do so is a modern concept and something that the Romans themselves never attempted. In ancient Rome, there were very few professional priests. There was a great variety of types of priests, but with a few exceptions, this was not a full-time occupation. Nor did most priests receive any specialized training. Priests mainly performed certain public rituals and sacrifices. The most prominent priests, who were almost exclusively male, were members of several important priesthoods called colleges. Each college had a fixed number of positions. When one member died, a new one was selected to take his place. The existing priests nominated several names to fill the vacancy. An election was then held, and the winner joined the college. Once elected to a priesthood, one held the office until death. The most important of these colleges was the Pontifical College. It contained 16 men called pontifexes and 15 called flamens. The leader of this college was known as the Pontifex Maximus, or the Great Priest, and he was considered the overall head of religious affairs. The pontifex's main duties were to preside over various religious festivals. Each of the flamens was associated with one particular god. Of these, 12 were known as minor flamens, and the remaining 3, the major flamens, were associated with 3 gods who were thought to have special links to the Roman people: Jupiter, the king of the gods, Mars, the god of war, and Quirinus, a deity associated with the Roman state and citizenship. In keeping with the importance attached to these gods, each of their flamens had special rules and regulations governing his behavior. The flamen of Jupiter was known as the Flamen Dialis, and since Jupiter was the king of the gods, he was the most important flamen. Jupiter was particularly linked to the city of Rome. Therefore, his flamen could never spend the night outside the city, nor could he sleep away from his own bed for more than 3 nights. To connect the Flamen Dialis with the earth, the legs of his bed were coated in clay. In order to avoid contamination, he could not eat beans, touch fermented flour, raw meat, or a dog, or see a dead body, a horse, or the Roman army. He could never have any knots on his clothing. And at all times, even in the privacy of his own home, He had to wear a special hat called the apex, which was like a circular disc with a rod protruding from the middle. The Flamen Dialis was the link between the city of Rome and the most potent aspect of Jupiter, known as Jupiter Optimus Maximus, Jupiter the best and the greatest. Also attached to the College of the Pontiffs was a group of 6 women, known as the Vestal Virgins. These were women who served Vesta, the goddess of the hearth, and by extension, the goddess of fire and of the home. In keeping with the idea that women could not be priests, when a woman became a Vestal, she in essence gave up her gender. Part of this belief was the requirement that they be virgins and that they remain virgins the entire time they served the goddess. Vestals had to serve for 30 years. In the first 10 years, they learned their duties. In the second, they performed them. And in the third, they taught others. After 30 years, they had the option of resigning from the priesthood and getting married, but it seems few did this. The ultimate crime for a Vestal was to lose her virginity. If she did this and were discovered, she was dressed in funeral clothes and carried in a funeral procession, with her friends and relatives lamenting. She was then placed in an underground room and buried alive. The most important duty of the Vestals was to tend the sacred fire. If this fire was allowed to go out, it was considered an omen foretelling the destruction of the city. The next most important college was the College of Augurs, of which there were 16. These priests had a specialized job. They had to discern the will of the gods through the interpretation of various signs. Much of Roman religious ritual practice, including augury, may have been derived from, or at least influenced by, the Etruscans. The 3 main categories of augury